Hi, my name is Frankie Blankenship, and I'm going to give my final speech today. And this is the practice speech. I smoke marijuana. I have since I was a teenager. This is no accident of peer pressure. Weed's as American as apple pie. However, the use, sale, and cultivation of marijuana is currently illegal in the United States due to an inconsistent application of the law. This outdated decision has had negative consequences for the United States, both legally and economically. Repealing the prohibition on marijuana through the legislative process is both possible and necessary in order to preserve the financial stability of our country, as well as to restore the mandate of individual responsibility, ending a failed war on drugs. Hi, my name is Frankie Blankenship, and I'm the Executive Director of Lightburner Media, a high-tech video production company based out of Denver, Colorado, specializing in eye-opening entertainment. I'm currently a student at Community College of Aurora, and I'm on the Dean's List for having good grades. I'm also currently a medical marijuana patient suffering from chronic pain, usually treatable by smoking marijuana on a daily basis. However, I've smoked marijuana since I was a teenager recreationally, and have witnessed both the legal and the financial difficulties created by hypocritical drug laws. I've been ticketed once with possession, otherwise have never suffered any legal inconveniences because of my use, but I'm not alone. The flagrant use of marijuana obtained illegally in the United States by everyday people has reached a new high. Most people living in the U.S. have either tried it or continue to use it regularly. The prohibition of marijuana, originally known as cannabis, has created internal economic hardship in the United States, as well as corrupted our moral standing in the global community by appearing to be hypocritical. With the loss of sales revenue, the cost of incarceration, and the cost to our culture with divisive politics, we can't afford to keep marijuana a scheduled narcotic. The aroma of burning pot is well known, even to non-users. Knowing this tradition is a part of our heritage, cannabis cultivation and marijuana use have existed in one form or another since the beginning of civilization. Why is it illegal? Not everybody agrees on the benefits of marijuana use, but it's vital to understand why we need to legalize this important plant. The real issue is that smoking weed is nothing new. The history of the legal use of marijuana is one of growth. In acquiring the knowledge of farming, the cultivation of marijuana also encouraged the cultivation of other plants. It was natural that marijuana would be prioritized the highest. It was the most useful. Cannabis is a leafy bush that naturally grows in temperate to tropical climates worldwide. Naturally occurring, the unique biological composition of the plant allows it to withstand the harsh rays of the sun, even in extreme weather. The coating of the leaves by the psychoactive compound THC actually protects the plant from solar radiation, much like sunscreen. This property was well known in early agricultural civilizations, and marijuana was grown in abundance. For 10,000 years of recorded history, marijuana has been cultivated heavily because of its useful properties. Among these properties are tensile strength for the fibers, medicinal use of the leaf and buds, and the properties of the pulp to dry evenly, allowing it to be used for paper. Early uses of marijuana included cloth for making bags and clothing and sails, paper and rope. The resin was useful for pitch and for sealant. All of this was in addition to its miraculous medicinal properties. Marijuana isn't really merely useful, it's something we came to depend on like a friend. The use of marijuana in various religious ceremonies in the East is considered sacred in importance. For them it's called ganja, which actually means holy. This isn't ancient history. Our founding fathers not only cultivated hemp as one of their primary crops, but lauded its benefits publicly. The cultivation and use of marijuana was heaviest in colonial areas because it was dependable. And now we can begin to see the error of prohibition. In 1937, Samuel Caldwell was arrested for selling marijuana without paying the newly mandated tax. He was fined $1,000 by Uncle Sam, and not only was that a fortune at the time, he was sentenced to 4 years of hard labor at Leavenworth Prison. So began the criminalization of marijuana and the creation of the largest black market in the world. We know how this story goes. The cops chased the mob around gangland looking for hot hooch for a decade, costing the American taxpayer millions in dollars, hundreds of lives. But the hypocrisy was apparent to everyone but us. We were our own enemy. Prohibition was a war on the people by the powers that be. The counterculture resisted this stranglehold again and again. Even after liquor flowed, marijuana became a scapegoat and a villain. Use of it was popular among the jazz crowds and the hippie movement, and both were labeled as subversive by our government. This message was spread far and wide, and by the 1980s, the war on drugs had spilled over onto America's streets. The price in lives skyrocketed once the drug lords of Mexico learned how quickly they could turn their green into our green. Giving our money to criminals eventually became a tank to our economy. This lesson is a personal one because it hits hard. The global recession has really hit everybody. Money's tight, people are looking for work, people have lost their homes, and medical bills never end. There must be a better way. It's a simple fact, though, that when you put 10 people in a room, they won't necessarily pick a leader, but they will choose somebody to pick on. This human tendency to single out and separate things we feel are dangerous or are inconsistent with our values, it's a defense mechanism that's gone awry on more than one occasion. Religions, races, and even sexuality is discriminated against in the name of preserving the status quo, and this has affected marijuana considerably, as its sale and use transcends these artificial barriers. The United States seems divided. Segregation is only a generation past, and divisive politics are the rule of the day. Our media is saturated with images encouraging a person to find one extreme or another and set up camp there. This defensive posturing has been harnessed by the powers that be, like a hypnotist swinging a pendulum left and right. We're hypnotized by rocking back and forth like a baby lulled to sleep. Racial minorities have long had a more relaxed view of marijuana. Black culture has developed unique language and styles such as crunk, celebrating its use. Chicanos and Latino Americans have been a long tradition of growing and smoking pot. During the prohibition of alcohol in the 1920s, minorities were often drawn to speakeasies where the use of liquor and marijuana was popular. These speakeasies were gathering points where people could be themselves, and often were the only places where free thinkers, liberated women, and gays could congregate. Marijuana use was a popular component of speakeasy culture that was radicalized by the authorities and the media. Films such as Reefer Madness pushed the idea that cannabis was bad for you, and that you risked your life if you ever used it. The Federal Bureau of Narcotics scheduled marijuana as an addictive drug that had no proven value. Since then, global drug trafficking has increased many times over. Our government continues to perform medical research on a plant that they claim has no medicinal value. Indeed, this plant has been approved for medicinal use in recent years, despite federal law. The United States has taken its own drug policy global by influencing other nations to prohibit marijuana and its sale and use. This manipulation of foreign governments has often had disastrous consequences. Often, such tampering leads to organized crime gaining power in a country. Substantial power. The United States has hypocritically presented itself to the United Nations as a stalwart proponent of criminalization, while secretly doing so much business with criminals that those criminals have become like corporations on the world stage. During the last decade, the financial state of our nation has stood on the brink of ruin. Overzealous military spending combined with runaway entitlement programs have eroded confidence in our government's ability to budget the resources that have been allotted to it. Combined with the failure of our government to keep wealthy lobbyists out of policy making, soon there will be nothing left if radical action isn't taken to reestablish another practical income base for the United States. Here in what we'll call the desert of the real, people get intoxicated on a variety of substances that are both toxic and addicting, legally. Alcohol abuse is epidemic. Car wrecks are attributed to alcohol use, and usually this has stayed high throughout history. However, we've seen the consequences of trying to cut the flow of liquor. Tobacco use is on the decline. Education over its addictive properties as well as the negative health effects has discouraged people from even trying it. However, unlike alcohol, the smoke from cigarettes affects people around the user. Cancer-causing smoke is inhaled secondhand and can lead to health problems over time. Despite this, use of tobacco is legal. Sale is tracked but not limited due to the toxicity of the product. You can buy any kind of tobacco from sea to shining sea, but not cannabis. Substitutes and alternatives have made their way to the market in recent years, but these unfortunately have proven to be more toxic, if not fatal, to some users. With names such as Spice, the appeal of finding something that can get you high legally can't be understated. Throughout this land, the loss of tax revenue, including sales tax as well as other fees for things such as transport and packaging, has accumulated to a breaking point. The trickle of theft from criminal gangs has become a flood of lost revenue, headed south to the line and to line the pockets of self-serving drug lords. Wherever weed is smoked, weed culture follows. Tie-dyes, blunt wraps, blown glass pipes and bongs, magazines, t-shirts, a variety of other merchandise can be bought and sold. Head shops proliferate wherever users can get to them. And here in Colorado, often right across the street from the dispensary. With all this money being lost, it's easy to see that the grass really is greener on the other side. Repealing the prohibition really would actually have an immediate effect on the marketplace. That's only a beginning. People with access to medicine have an improved health and quality of life. People that don't go to jail don't make lawyers wealthy. Instead, buy things that are better for themselves and their family. To say nothing of the savings to the great state of Colorado. The price of incarcerating so many people, so often disproportionately people of color, is staggering. Money is wasted on investigations, processing, and housing criminals that could be used instead for education and the general welfare. Those communities that suffer from chronic addiction cycles could receive professional assistance that actually addresses these issues. These afflicted communities could become stronger and less dependent on escape-style recreation that often translates into getting high. When these two worlds are shown side by side, it's easy to see the deficit. We're losing not only our resources, but our soul. Liberty means freedom. Freedom from and for everything that we hold dear. Religion, speech, a right to bear arms, assembly, and the precious right to decide whether or not to vote. Without the guarantees our founding fathers wrote into the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights, our nation's guiding principles would lack any protections for our privacy or peace of mind. The prohibition of marijuana is a violation of these principles. It's our responsibility to reclaim the American dream. No matter where you lie on the political spectrum, repeal makes sense. Traditional conservatives value personal accountability over nanny state governments insisting on asserting themselves in our daily lives. Modern progressives and liberals perpetuate an ideal of fairness and self-determination as virtues that drive us forward. All libertarians are ultimately in favor of fewer laws, so upholding our beliefs is actually made easier by getting rid of this intrusive legislation. Disinformation about marijuana continues to be spread by lobbyists and those with a personal grudge rather than any mindful consideration of facts. The view of our nation and our culture by those abroad continues to lower. What can the expectations be of a country that isn't honest with itself? By opening and engaging other nations in a legal marketplace, the United States could compete with countries such as the Netherlands and Jamaica, bringing money to the States rather than offshore or tying it up overseas. Shifting away from this responsibility has been a bad idea. Our need for independence has to be balanced by an acceptance of personal responsibility. Because when our government withholds our ability to make that determination for ourselves, we suffer economically and legally. The cost of criminalization is draining our resources. The cost of a failed drug war impacts lives every single day with invasive screening, unjust searches, and legal fees that only serve the attorneys that actually help to put those laws in place to begin with. Banning everyday products doesn't eliminate them. It only makes them illicit, which gives an opportunity to enemies of the state to exploit. Running a prison system that's essentially a business has created a need to arrest people just to keep the bills paid. We can change this. In fact, we already are. The repeal is already happening right here in Colorado. In the past, medical marijuana initiatives have been passed to compassionately allow medical marijuana patients to have access to it legally. People such as myself who need marijuana to feel better. However, the upcoming vote here in Colorado in November benefits everybody. The undertow of ignorance and cultural prejudice against marijuana is quickly fading. It's expected that within our lifetime, cannabis cultivation and harvesting will continue to grow at an unprecedented scale. Police states will continue to make a profit at the expense of consumers unless we act to reclaim this right to manufacture, distribute, and use marijuana for ourselves. There's little doubt that the Mexican cartels would prefer our nation's drug laws to remain the same, because they continue to profit, as well as to spread their corrupt influence in the face of our bureaucratic hypocrisy. We can make a difference by simply stating the obvious. Marijuana is no more dangerous than liquor or cigarettes, and quite a bit less so. When the criminalization of marijuana ends, we'll all benefit from a far more fair legal system and a more solid economy and more consumer choices. Raise your hand if you've ever tried marijuana. Look around. See how many of us there are. Do we all deserve to go to jail? The time has come for a reckoning. Elected officials have thus far been unable to withstand the influence of rapacious lobbyists that have made marijuana illegal in the first place. It's our duty as Americans to reclaim this responsibility like we did at the end of the 20s. We the people have the power to reassert our role as protectors of liberty in the freest nation on earth. We have to be role models to our children and the rest of the world, and we can't afford to let this opportunity slip away. At this time, I'd like to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much for listening.